Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good any time of the day or night, wherever you are. Peace and blessings. And thank you for giving me just a little bit of your time tonight. Um, so I want to go on and read a new, very short chapter, and then I want to come back. So let me read this, okay? It's called the Negro Marriage Unit. We breed two N-word males with two N-word females. Then we take the N-word males away from them and keep them moving and working. Say one N-word female bears an N-word female and the other bears an N-word male. Both N-word females being without the influence of the N-word male image. Froze with an independent psychology will raise their offspring into reverse positions. The one with the female offspring will teach her to be like herself, independent and negotiable. And they have in parentheses, we negotiate with her, through her, by her, and negotiate at her will. Close parentheses. Because the one with the N-word male offspring who is frozen with a subconscious fear for his life will raise him to be mentally dependent and weak, but physically strong. In other words, body over mind. Now, in a few years, when these offspring become fertile for early reproduction, we will mate and breed them and continue the cycle. That is good, sound, and long-range comprehensive planning. So this is what they had. I want to go back here. I'm going to go over all that, but I want to go back to the end of the last chapter to a phrase that said, unless a phenomenon occurs and reshifts the position of the female savages or the African women. Okay, so it says the cycle turns on its own axis forever unless a female phenomenon occurs and reshifts the position of the female African woman. Okay, now let's go back a little bit further and understand what this is. They say that they do this continually, all the time. Make sure you are never not doing it. Do it all the time. And that is by throwing the N-word female, I'm going to stop saying the N-word for this part, by throwing that African female into a frozen psychological state of independency, by killing the protective male image, and by creating a submissive, dependent mind of the African male, we have created an orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis forever. So this is what they did, knowingly, willingly, they knew what they were doing. So when it comes down to them breeding these two African men with these two African women, and they didn't necessarily have to be there, it wasn't their husbands, it was just two African males and two African females. They weren't really concerned about relationship. As a matter of fact, they didn't even want relationship between them. They just wanted to use them for the purpose of procreating. But anyway, they put the two males, the African males and the two African females together for breeding purposes. And then what do? They take the males away. Take the males away from them and keep them moving and working. And so what have they done? They have taken the strength, the one that this female African has confidence in and relies on. They have taken that away, and they have left her there by herself. And she has been indoctrinated in the fact that she has seen countless times male Africans killed in the most horrible ways imaginable. And understand that where she came from, this was foreign. We read an article that was written, and it was talking about pre-colonial Nigeria. And by the way, I picked this because I am over 50% Nigerian. Yeah. Okay. Now, but it was talking about in this pre-colonial family hierarchy, which was patrilineal and patriarchal, okay, that the senior males, the father or the grandfather, were responsible for making decisions managing property and providing for the family. Now, within the household, men were typically tasked with providing for family through hunting, fishing, and farming, and the women were responsible for child care and domestic duties. Now, in today's society, most women would look at that and say, I can do anything a man can do. I'm not going to be sitting here just raising kids and taking care of the house. I can do more than that. I'm more intelligent than that. I have more skills and more talent than that. And I'm going to go out here and use it. That's because we have stepped away from what we had culturally before we were taken from the continent that worked. This was not a position that the female was relegated to, taking care of the children and the household. That she had a position that without, the family would not function. Because what family do you know that can biologically have children without a woman? Now, the man can spread his seed, but he has to have his seed. He has to have something to put the seed in. And so the importance of the woman, the African woman, in the family was well known and well accepted. Not only in the African community, but you heard what Willie Lynch said about the female, I keep thinking I'm on my pad, about the female that was independent and negotiable, and what? And we negotiate with her, through her, by her, and negotiate at her will. Why? She's an African slave as far as they're concerned. Why? Because without the African female and the male, they had to use the male, but men can't have children. So they had to breed this woman, African male and African woman, because without the woman, there are no children. And without the children, there are no eventual slaves. And without eventual slaves, there's no work. And without any work, there's no money being made. And without any money being made, there's no wealth. So, for the slave owner, he recognized the value of a woman. And this is why he made her that access on which that cycle was made. because without her, it wasn't going to work. It was not going to work. So, also, the way that they said that the Negro marriage unit, the way they did it was marriage was for breeding only. And sometimes it didn't even take marriage. It just took a man and a woman, to breed. And many times it did, because a lot of times when they were breeding, they were looking for a particular offspring, particular kind, to look a certain way, to have a certain genetic physique. So a lot of times they were breeding because of that. It was what they wanted to have. They were breeding because, they didn't want the darker female slaves working in the house. It looked better to them. Okay? But there were a lot of things they did because of the breeding to get the kind of breeding. But they relegated marriage to, you lay down with this woman, you have a kid, and you may or may not get to raise that kid. You may or may not get to know that child. You may or may not even know that you have a son or a daughter. You may not. Now, here's what I'm saying. Why is that important? Because this is the impact that it had on, and still has, on the African descendant community. This is it. You have men and sometimes women. I know women who have left their children with a man because they just didn't want to deal with them. Okay? But you have men, more likely, who will lay with a woman, make a child, and not know that child from a hole in the wall. 20 years later, that child come and punch him in the face, and they wouldn't know to say who it was. And that's still, it's not that the men, the African men who had been enslaved wanted that. It was how they were indoctrinated to think that, oh yeah, there might be a child, but it's not my responsibility to provide for that child. That's master's responsibility to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll, get to know him, maybe I won't. And they weren't doing that because they were that callous. A lot of them also thought, I'll never get to raise my child. I'll never get to know my child. So emotionally, psychologically, for them, it was better not to get close to them. It was more painful to look out somewhere and see a little child that looks just like you, and you know that is your son or your daughter, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't approach them. You can't play with them. You can't, help them. You can't encourage them. You can't share any wisdom with them. You can't relate to them at all. And this is part of the Willie Lynch syndrome that has carried over these past 300 plus years. And that's what we have to know. We have to understand that that is what took place. I'm not real finished with this part yet, but I am looking at my time here, and I think I'm going to have to stop and come back, and I will come back and just go over the rest of this part so that we can get it really, really clear what is going on here. All right? And what they were trying to do. Okay. So, thank you for spending your time with me. I wish you peace and blessings. And y'all, stay woke. Stay woke. Don't sleep. Stay woke. Love y'all. Talk to you later.